This morning, we're going to talk about a very serious topic. One, I hope that the Adventists and the Sabbath keeping groups will dare to listen and to study, because it's so serious that I can't express it. And this is a story from the scriptures about how the Sabbath keepers, in their very low tactics, willing to say anything against Christ and his apostles, in a desperate attempt to get their way and breed hatred towards Christ and his church. So I hope you're sitting down. I hope you'll be very reflective of what Christ is saying here in this story. Because what you're going to see is the Sabbath keepers are going to call Christ Beelzebub, Satan. He warns them of the unpardonable sin. And Christ warns that if they called Christ Satan, they will call his church Satan too. It's incredible that the Adventists will stoop to the same low tactics, very low life tactics, that the Sabbath keepers do in the scriptures. It's almost like, in some cases, it's almost like they went to the same school of tactics, like a military school, where they learn to be very vile. And the way they handle a simple conversation, you can't just disagree with them. When you back them into a corner, they get mean, they get vicious, and they will stoop to anything to win. And here's a perfect example from the scriptures. The Sabbath keepers called Christ Satan possessed. Here is God. Here is the Lord of the Sabbath. Now, they love the Lord. They love the Sabbath. Here's the Lord of the Sabbath standing right before the Sabbath keepers. They are utterly blind. Mark 3, verse 20. And the multitude came together so that they could not so much as eat bread. And when his friends had heard it, they went out and laid hold of him. And they are laying hold of Christ. For they said, he is beside himself. In other words, he's disassociated. And the scribes came down from Jerusalem, the home of the Sabbath keepers. And they said, he has Beelzebub. This is what they say of Christ. It's funny. It's what they say of the Pope. And by the prince of the devils, he cast out devils. What enters a heart and mind that would stoop that far? The Sabbath keepers came down from Jerusalem, the home of the Sabbath keepers, and they called Christ Beelzebub. And he cast out devils by the prince of the devils. Therefore Christ warned his disciples of the Sabbath keepers who would persecute Christ unto death, and said to his disciples in Matthew 10. The disciple, that means the follower of Christ, is not above his master, nor his servant above his Lord. it is not enough for the disciple that he be as, it is enough that a disciple to be as his master and a servant as his Lord. If they, that is the Sabbath keepers, called the master Christ, the master of the house, Christ is the head of the church, if they called him Beelzebub, how much more shall they, the Sabbath keepers, call them of his household, the church? You see how it all falls into pattern? Christ is very wise. He understands that they're going to call, the Sabbath keepers going to call his church of Satan. And they're going to call his people of Satan. And they're going to call the Pope Satan. This day, this verse is fulfilled in you, Sabbath keepers. You should read it and weep, but you won't. You will continue down the same old path and probably get even more hardened than you already were. Christ, speaking of the Sabbath keepers in Matthew 23, says the following: Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets, wise men, scribes. Some of them you, Sabbath keepers, shall kill and crucify, and some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that killest the prophets and stone them that are sent unto you. He didn't say that about Rome. He said it about Jerusalem. And in Revelation, what do you see? The two witnesses are killed in no other city but Jerusalem. You want to make a bet who they're killed by? Matthew 12, verse 22. So, here in Matthew 12, the scribes came down from Jerusalem, and they said he has Beelzebub, and by the prince of the devils he cast out devils. And he called them unto him, and he said unto them in a parable, How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. If Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but has an end. No man can enter a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he first bind the strong man and then spoil his goods. Verily I say unto you, all sins shall be forgiven unto the sons of man, and blasphemies wherewith whatsoever they shall blaspheme. But he that shall blaspheme against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is in danger of eternal damnation, because they said he has an unclean spirit. Because they said he has an unclean spirit, that he's demon possessed, that he's Satan. And just like Christ prophesied, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they said it to Christ, they're going to say it to his servants. He's demon possessed. He's Satan. He's the Antichrist. I just read that this morning in a reply. The Pope is the Antichrist. You'll see that all over. What kind of spirit, what blindness, what arrogance does it take for a human being to arrive to the point where they say that about anybody, much less the Pope? How self-righteous can you possibly be? That comes out of a spirit that is raw hatred. Christ spoke regarding the persecution of Christians by the Sabbath keepers in Matthew 5, verse 11. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you. And he's talking about the Sabbath keepers. I'm going to show you. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets before you. They persecuted their own prophets. Then Christ says again in John 6, verse 26, Woe unto you when all men speak well of you. And he's talking now to the Sabbath keepers. So when he's saying, when all the Sabbath keepers speak well unto you, woe unto you, because so did their fathers to the false prophets. When you read people, oh, I love you, Dr. Bachelor, Dr. Boring, Dr. Mark Finley, I love you, Mark Weston, all these people, and they love the praise of men. Yeah, well, they spoke well of their false prophets too. Now, if you want to see exactly what I'm talking about, go to YouTube, watch Doug Batchelor's videos, watch Stephen Boring and Mark Finley, and just watch all the people. Oh, the sycophants will praise them forever, just like the Sabbath keepers praise their false prophets before them. And they will persecute the church just like they persecuted Christ, just like Christ prophesied. They will call Christ's church the Antichrist. They will call the Pope Antichrist. They will call the people of the church the whore of Babylon. Every vile name they can think of. Because they're self-righteous and blind to their own sins. If you feel like you'd like to subscribe to this, I know it's been a very strong rebuke of the Sabbath keepers, but it's the absolute truth. And you can find out the truth about the immortality of the soul, where I clearly and explicitly refute the carnal minds and the carnal view of life, the doctrine of eternal punishment, explained very thoroughly, the church, one faith, one hope, one spirit, one body, the church. Not 35,000 different bodies all contradicting each other. And his name was Cephas, not Peter. And all you people who love to call Christ by 10,000 different names with 40 different spellings, then you can understand and will put your Hebrew roots to the test and see if you'll call Peter in the Greek Cephas, like Christ called him, which means rock. A very thorough explanation of why Christians worship on Sunday is available, the Sabbath in the Old and New Testament, and the great controversy between Christ and the Sabbath keepers. A whole lot more. If you're just looking at this morning, I just showed a few verses between Christ and the Sabbath keepers. There's a whole lot more. Anyway, this is not for the faint of heart use among the Sabbath keepers. I'm sure it's going to anger them, something fierce, but it's a rebuke. It's the same rebuke Christ gave them in Matthew 23. Read it. He's talking to the Sabbath keepers, devout Sabbath keepers. They're totally and utterly blind. You let Ellen G. White and the Adventist Church, Doug Batchelor, with all his smooth little speeches, and their pastor, who sounds more like Mr. Rogers, with all these smooth sayings and smooth words, deceive you into a false Christ. God help you. If you want more information, there's plenty of information at my website, and you can contact me there. For those who are sincerely interested in being Christian, God bless you. Come out of her, Ellen G. White, my people.